Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you handed them the keys to your entire world, only to discover they were quietly making copies for someone else? I'm about to tell you about the day I found my sister's diary hidden in my husband's office drawer, and how 3 handwritten pages destroyed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, family, and the person sleeping next to me for 6 years. The moment that changes your life forever doesn't announce itself with sirens or warning signs. It arrives disguised as an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, as unremarkable as any other day you've lived through without marking on a calendar. Mine came while I was looking for a stapler. Before I continue with this story, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from today. Drop your city or country in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious to see how far these stories of heartbreak and awakening travel across the world. Maybe you're folding laundry right now, commuting home from work, or lying in bed unable to sleep. Wherever you are, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Behind every screen is another person who has also had their Wednesday, that moment when the floor fell out from under their feet and they had to learn how to stand on ground that no longer felt solid. My name is Victoria Ashford, and until that afternoon, I was a 31-year-old woman who genuinely believed she had figured out the secret to a happy life. I wasn't wealthy or famous, but I had something I valued more: a sense of security, a feeling that I had built something real and lasting. I had been married for 6 years to Daniel, my college sweetheart, and we lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city center. We didn't have children yet, but we had plans. Detailed plans. Names picked out, a savings account growing slowly but steadily, weekend conversations about what kind of parents we wanted to be. I worked as a junior editor at a mid-sized publishing house, the kind of job that doesn't pay brilliantly but fills you with purpose. I spent my days helping authors shape their stories, finding the emotional truth buried in rough drafts, and I loved it. Daniel worked in software development for a startup, always coming home with stories about coding problems and team dynamics that I only half understood, but always listened to with genuine interest. We weren't one of those couples who finished each other's sentences or had matching coffee mugs. We were quieter than that, more ordinary. We had our routines. Saturday morning farmers market runs, Sunday evenings meal prepping for the week ahead, Wednesday date nights that we protected fiercely even when we were both exhausted. We argued sometimes, usually about small things like whose turn it was to take out the trash or whether we could afford a weekend getaway. But we always resolved it. We always came back to center. My younger sister, Lily, had been living with us for the past 8 months. She was 26, fresh out of a painful breakup, and completely adrift. When she showed up at our door last autumn with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes, asking if she could stay, just for a few weeks, Daniel didn't even hesitate. "Of course," he said. "Family takes care of family." That was one of the things I loved most about him, his immediate generosity, his willingness to make space for people who needed it. Lily set herself up in our tiny guest room, the one we'd been using as a home office. Daniel moved his desk into the corner of our bedroom without complaint. She got a job waitressing at a busy downtown restaurant, working late shifts that meant she often came home after we were already asleep. In the mornings, I'd find evidence of her presence: a mug in the sink, a blanket folded on the couch, a thank you note stuck to the fridge for some small kindness we'd shown her. She seemed to be healing slowly. She started smiling again, joined a yoga class, talked about maybe going back to school for her master's degree. I was proud of her. I felt like we were doing something good, giving her the foundation she needed to rebuild her life. Daniel was wonderful with her too, always asking how her day went, offering to help her practice for job interviews, making her laugh with his terrible jokes at dinner. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way Lily would fall silent when I entered a room where she and Daniel were talking. How she'd glance at him before answering my questions, as if checking for permission or alignment. The inside jokes they seemed to develop, references I didn't understand that they'd wave away as nothing, just something funny that happened earlier. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I should be happy my husband and sister were getting along so well. That Wednesday started like any other. I woke up at 6:30, showered while Daniel made coffee, kissed him goodbye as he headed to his office downtown. Lily's door was closed. She'd worked until midnight and wouldn't be up for hours. I took the bus to work, spent the morning in back-to-back meetings with authors, broke for a salad at my desk while reviewing a manuscript about family secrets and betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me later. Around 2 in the afternoon, I realized I'd left an important contract at home that needed signatures by end of day. I texted Daniel to let him know I was running back to grab it, but he didn't respond. He was probably in a meeting. I took an early lunch break and caught a rideshare home. The apartment was quiet when I let myself in. Lily's door was still closed, and I assumed she was sleeping off her late shift. I went to our bedroom to retrieve the contract from Daniel's desk, which he'd been using temporarily while his main workspace was being set up at his new office location. I opened the top drawer looking for the stapler I knew he kept there, and that's when I saw it. A small journal with a soft leather cover, the kind you'd buy at an artisan market. It was wedged beneath a stack of tech magazines, hidden but not quite hidden enough. I don't know what made me pull it out. I'm not someone who snoops. I'd never read Daniel's emails or checked his phone. But something about the way it was positioned, deliberately concealed, made my hands move before my brain could stop them. I opened it to a random page, expecting to find Daniel's handwriting, maybe work notes or personal thoughts he'd been keeping private. Instead, I saw my sister's handwriting, Lily's distinctive looping script that I'd known since we were children. And in that moment, standing in my bedroom holding my sister's diary that had been hidden in my husband's desk, I felt the first crack appear in the foundation of my life. The first entry I read was dated 3 months ago, right around the time Lily had started to seem happier, more settled. I recognized the date because it was the weekend after her birthday, when the 3 of us had gone to that Italian restaurant downtown and celebrated with too much wine and tiramisu. "I can't keep pretending anymore," her entry began. "Every time Victoria hugs me or tells me she's proud of how far I've come, I feel like the worst person in the world. But when Daniel looks at me the way he did tonight at dinner, when his hand brushed mine under the table while she was looking at the menu, I forget every reason why this is wrong. I forget that she's my sister. I forget that he's her husband. I only remember that I've never felt this alive, this seen, this wanted." I read those words 3 times before they finally penetrated. My hands started shaking so badly that I had to sit down on the edge of the bed, our bed, the one Daniel and I had picked out together at that furniture store, debating for hours about firmness levels and thread counts. I kept reading. I couldn't stop myself. Entry after entry detailed a relationship I never knew existed. It had started, according to Lily's careful documentation, about 5 months ago. A late night when I'd gone to bed early with a migraine, and she and Daniel had stayed up watching a movie. She wrote about how they'd talked for hours after I went to sleep, sharing things they'd never told anyone else. How the conversation had shifted from friendly to something else, something charged and dangerous. "He told me he loves Victoria, but he's not in love with her anymore," one entry read. "He said they've become roommates, going through the motions. He said when he looks at me, he feels the way he used to feel at the beginning, before everything became routine and predictable. I know I should feel guilty, but mostly I just feel grateful that someone finally sees me as more than the broken little sister who needs saving." There were details I didn't want to know but couldn't look away from. Stolen kisses in the kitchen while I was in the shower. Text messages deleted immediately after being sent. An afternoon 2 weeks ago when I'd been at a work conference, and they'd spent the entire day together, ending up in our bed. Our bed. I felt something rising in my throat, hot and acidic. I ran to the bathroom and barely made it before I was sick, my body rejecting this new reality as violently as poison. When I came back to the bedroom, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, I forced myself to keep reading. I needed to know everything. I needed to understand the scope of what had been happening in my own home while I'd been walking around oblivious, believing in the fairy tale I'd constructed. The most recent entry was from yesterday, Tuesday evening. I remembered that night clearly. Daniel had said he needed to work late on a project deadline. Lily had been home, had made dinner for the 2 of us, and we'd watched a cooking show together, laughing at the contestants' mistakes. After I'd gone to bed, she'd written, "Victoria went to sleep early again. She's been so tired lately, always stressed about work. Daniel came home around 11, and we had 2 hours together while she slept. We're running out of time. He's going to tell her soon. He promised me. We've been looking at apartments online, places where we could start fresh, just the 2 of us. I know this will destroy her, and that knowledge sits in my stomach like a stone. But I also know I can't walk away from this. From him. From us. I've never felt this kind of love before, this consuming, desperate need for another person. Daniel says we'll tell her together, that will be honest and help her understand that sometimes love just happens where you least expect it. He says she'll forgive us eventually, that she's strong enough to move past this. I want to believe him. I closed the journal carefully, as if it might explode if I moved too quickly. My mind was racing, trying to fit this new information into the life I thought I'd been living. Every memory was now suspect, every moment recontextualized. The way Daniel had been more distant lately, claiming work stress. How Lily had started dressing differently, wearing makeup around the apartment. The expensive perfume she'd bought last month that I'd assumed she'd saved up for. All those Wednesday date nights Daniel and I had protected so carefully. I wondered now how many times he'd been sitting across from me at dinner, holding my hand, while his mind was somewhere else entirely. With someone else entirely. Welcome to Stories from Iris, where I share new life stories every day. Stories, real or inspired by reality, that could be yours or someone you know. If you subscribe and like this video, it genuinely helps me a lot to keep telling stories like this. And now, let's get back to the story because I promise you, what happens next will stay with you long after this video ends. I don't know how long I sat there on the edge of our bed, that journal heavy in my lap like evidence at a crime scene. Minutes. Hours. Time had lost all meaning. The apartment around me felt different now, contaminated. Every surface they'd touched together, every room where they'd laughed at their private jokes, every moment of my carefully constructed life had been built on a foundation of lies. I heard a door open down the hall. Lily's bedroom door. The sound of her footsteps padding toward the kitchen, still sleepy, probably looking for coffee. I heard the tap run, the clink of a mug being pulled from the cabinet. Normal sounds. Domestic sounds. The sounds of someone who felt safe and comfortable in this space. I stood up slowly, the journal still in my hands, and walked down the hallway. Each step felt deliberate, like I was walking toward something I couldn't come back from. There are moments in life where you can still choose to turn around, to pretend you didn't see what you saw, to preserve the illusion because the truth is too terrible to face. But I kept walking. Lily was standing at the counter, her back to me, pouring coffee into her favorite mug, the one with the sunflowers that I'd given her last Christmas. She was wearing one of Daniel's old college t-shirts, the one that used to be mine to borrow, and the sight of it made something inside me turn to ice. "Good morning," she said without turning around, her voice still rough with sleep. "I thought you were at work. Did you forget something?" I didn't answer. I just stood there in the kitchen doorway, watching her, trying to reconcile this person, my baby sister whom I'd protected and loved and welcomed into my home, with the person who had written those entries. She must have sensed something in my silence because she turned around, coffee mug halfway to her lips. When she saw my face, when she saw what I was holding, all the color drained from her cheeks. "Victoria," she whispered, and the mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor. Coffee splashed across the kitchen, dark and spreading, like the truth finally spilling out after being contained for so long. "How long?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and cold, like it belonged to someone else entirely. "I can explain," she started, but I held up the journal, cutting her off. "How long?" I repeated. She stood there frozen, coffee dripping from the counter onto her bare feet, and I watched her decide in real time whether to lie or tell the truth. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the rapid assessment of what I might already know, what she could still hide. 5 months, she finally whispered, and the confession seemed to deflate her. She sagged against the counter, wrapping her arms around herself. "Victoria, I never meant for this to happen. I swear to you, I never." "Never what?" I cut her off, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Never meant to sleep with my husband? Never meant to fall in love with him? Never meant to plan a whole future together while living under my roof, eating my food, accepting my help?" She flinched at each accusation, but she didn't deny any of it. That was somehow worse than if she'd tried to lie. At least a lie would have meant she still cared enough about my feelings to try to protect me from the full truth. "I read it all, Lily. Every entry. Every stolen moment. Every time you two laughed about how tired I was, how stressed, how oblivious." I held up the journal, and my hands were surprisingly steady now. The shock was wearing off, being replaced by something harder, colder. "You wrote about being in my bed with him." "My bed, Lily. While I was at a work conference, trying to build a career, you were in my home destroying my marriage." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face now. "I know it's unforgivable. I know I'm a terrible person. But Victoria, you have to understand, what Daniel and I have, it's real. It's not just some affair or some stupid mistake. We love each other. That word. Love. As if love justified anything. As if love made betrayal somehow noble. You don't know what love is, I said quietly. Love doesn't hide in shadows. Love doesn't write in secret journals about how guilty you feel while continuing to do the exact thing you feel guilty about. Love doesn't look someone in the face every single day and lie. You don't understand, Lily said desperately, taking a step toward me. I stepped back instinctively, and the hurt that flashed across her face felt like poetic justice. Daniel and I, we tried to fight it. We really did. But you and him, Victoria, you've been disconnected for so long. He told me how you barely talk anymore, how you're always too tired for him, how the spark is just gone. Stop. The word came out like a whip crack. Don't you dare try to make this about my failings as a wife. Don't you dare try to justify what you did by claiming my marriage was already broken. You didn't find some wounded man in a failing relationship. You pursued my husband. You made a choice every single day for 5 months to betray me. The truth of my own words hit me as I said them. This wasn't some accident of fate or some tragic love story. This was a series of deliberate choices, hundreds of them, each one a small betrayal that added up to this massive destruction. Where did you keep this? I asked, holding up the journal. Why was it in Daniel's desk? She looked down at the coffee spreading across the floor, anywhere but at me. He wanted to read it. He liked reading about us, about how I felt about him. He said it made him feel alive again. The casual intimacy of that confession, the way she said it like it was romantic rather than sick, made my stomach turn. They had been so deep into their own fantasy that they'd lost touch with reality, with basic human decency. Pack your things, I said. You have 1 hour. Take what you need and leave. I don't want to see you again, not today, not next week, not ever. Victoria, please, she begged, moving toward me again. Can we just talk about this? Can we? No, I said firmly. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. What about Daniel? She asked, and there was something in her voice, a possessiveness that made my blood boil. Are you going to tell him, you know? I smiled then, and it wasn't a kind smile. Oh, I'm going to tell him. But not the way you think. Now pack. She stood there for another moment, looking like she wanted to say more. But something in my expression must have convinced her that I was done listening. She turned and walked back to her room, leaving wet footprints of coffee across the hardwood floor. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee, and felt something shift inside me. The initial shock was fading, being replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to scream or beg or try to understand. I was going to be strategic. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of every page of the journal. Every single entry, every confession, every detail of their affair. Then I texted my best friend, Melissa, who happened to be a family lawyer. Emergency. Need your help. Can you meet me at my place in an hour? Her response came immediately. On my way. Are you okay? I thought about that question. Was I okay? No. Would I be okay? I didn't know. But I was functioning, and right now that was enough. While Lily packed in her room, I could hear her crying, the sound of drawers opening and closing, the rustle of clothes being stuffed into suitcases. I felt nothing. The sister I'd loved, the one I'd protected and helped and welcomed into my home, was dead to me. This person crying in the guest room was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. I called work and told them I had a family emergency and wouldn't be back today. My boss, who'd known me for 5 years and had never heard me take a personal day, didn't ask questions. Take care of yourself, Victoria. Take whatever time you need. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and started making a list. It's what I always did when I was overwhelmed. Make a list, create a plan, take action. The list had 3 columns: immediate actions, short-term goals, and long-term consequences. Under immediate actions, I wrote, remove Lily from the apartment. Secure all evidence. Meet with lawyer. Prepare for conversation with Daniel. Under short-term goals. File for divorce. Separate finances. Find new living situation. Tell family the truth. Under long-term consequences. Rebuild life. Process trauma. Decide on relationship with family. Learn to trust again. That last one seemed impossible, but I wrote it anyway. Melissa arrived before Lily had finished packing. I let her in, and she took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. I stood there stiffly, not quite able to accept comfort yet, still too focused on maintaining control. "What happened?" she asked, pulling back to look at me. I handed her my phone with the photos of the journal entries. "Daniel's been having an affair with my sister for 5 months. They're planning to move in together. He was going to tell me soon." Melissa's face went through several expressions: shock, horror, rage, before settling into professional determination. Okay, we're going to handle this. You're going to be fine. Better than fine. But first, I need you to tell me everything." I did. I told her about finding the journal, about confronting Lily, about my plan. Melissa listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on her phone. "This is actually good," she finally said. "I know it doesn't feel good, but legally, this is very good for you. Written evidence of the affair, timeline, premeditation. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, but this will help with asset division and any spousal support negotiations. He won't have much room to argue." Lily emerged from the guest room then, 2 suitcases and a duffel bag packed, her eyes red and swollen. She looked at Melissa, then at me, and seemed to understand that this was really happening, that I wasn't going to change my mind. "I'll need to come back for the rest of my things," she said quietly. "You can coordinate with Melissa," I replied. "You won't be coming back when I'm here." "Victoria, I'm so sorry," she tried one more time. "I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to, but I hope someday you can." "Goodbye, Lily," I said, and turned away from her. I heard her footsteps, the rustle of her bags, the door opening and closing. And just like that, she was gone. The apartment felt different immediately, lighter somehow, despite the weight of what I'd just learned. "What about Daniel?" Melissa asked. "Do you want to be here when he gets home?" I thought about that. Part of me wanted to confront him the way I'd confronted Lily, to watch his face when he realized I knew everything. But another part of me, the part that was thinking strategically, had a different idea. "No," I said slowly. "I have something else in mind." Melissa looked at me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "What are you thinking?" "Daniel doesn't know that I know yet," I said, my mind working through the possibilities. "He's been planning this whole thing, probably rehearsing what he's going to say to me, how he's going to break the news. He thinks he has control of the narrative. And you want to take that away from him," Melissa finished, understanding dawning on her face. "Exactly." I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was 3:30. Daniel usually got home around 6 on Wednesdays. I want to pack my things and be gone before he gets home. I want him to walk into an empty apartment with a note, just like Lily walked out with her suitcases. "That's cold," Melissa said, but she was smiling slightly. "I approve." We spent the next 2 hours methodically packing my essentials. Clothes, toiletries, important documents, my laptop, the photos I actually cared about. Melissa helped me carry boxes down to her car. The whole time, my phone sat on the counter, silent. Daniel hadn't texted all day, which wasn't unusual, but now it felt significant. He was probably texting Lily instead, making plans for their future. As I packed, I found evidence of their relationship everywhere, now that I knew to look for it. A pair of earrings I'd never seen Lily wear before, tucked behind the bathroom mirror. Expensive ones. A gift from Daniel, probably. A receipt in the pocket of his jacket for a restaurant we'd never been to together, dated 2 months ago. A bottle of perfume in the medicine cabinet that wasn't mine, the same scent I'd noticed on Lily lately. Each discovery was another small cut, another piece of proof that my entire life had been a performance while the real story played out behind my back. "Are you going to take your wedding photos?" Melissa asked, pointing to the framed pictures on the dresser. I looked at them, our faces frozen in moments of apparent happiness. The kiss at the altar. Our first dance. Cutting the cake while everyone cheered. I remembered those moments so vividly, how loved I'd felt, how certain I was that we'd made the right choice. Had Daniel already been having doubts even then? Or had something changed along the way? "No," I said. "Leave them. Let him look at them, and remember what he threw away." By 5:30, I'd packed everything I needed. My belongings filled the trunk and back seat of Melissa's car. The apartment looked strange now, half empty, like it was already transitioning into something else, some future version that didn't include me. I sat down at the kitchen table one last time and pulled out a notepad. I thought about what to write, how to capture everything I was feeling in a way that would make an impact. I thought about being cruel, vindictive, listing every detail from Lily's journal. But that would give him too much. It would show him I was hurt. Instead, I wrote simply, "Daniel, I found Lily's journal in your desk drawer. I've read every entry. I know everything. I've taken my things and filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in contact. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not try to explain or apologize. We're done. You and Lily can have the life you planned. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be, though somehow I doubt it will be. Relationships built on betrayal have a way of collapsing under their own weight. You'll find the journal in the trash where it belongs. I kept copies of everything for my lawyer. Goodbye, Victoria. I read it over twice, folded it carefully, and left it on the kitchen table where he'd find it the moment he walked in. Then I placed the journal next to it, a final piece of evidence. Melissa drove me to a hotel downtown, a nice one with room service and thick curtains that would block out the world. You'll stay here tonight, she said firmly. Tomorrow we'll figure out something more permanent. But tonight you rest. I don't know if I can rest, I admitted as we stood in the hotel lobby. My mind won't stop. Then don't rest. Order terrible food, watch bad TV, scream into a pillow. Do whatever you need to do. But you're safe here, and that's what matters right now. She was right. After she left, I sat on the hotel bed in the silence of a room that belonged to no one. And I finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The anger came first, hot and overwhelming, making me want to throw things, break things, scream until my throat was raw. Then came the grief, the devastating loss of not just my marriage, but my sister, my family, the future I'd been planning. And underneath it all was something else, something I hadn't expected. Relief. I was relieved. Relieved to finally understand why Daniel had been so distant lately. Relieved to know it wasn't something wrong with me, some failing I couldn't identify. Relieved to be free of a relationship that had apparently been dying while I was too busy working and planning and trying to make everything perfect to notice. My phone started buzzing around 6:30. Daniel calling. I watched it ring, watched his name flash on the screen, and I didn't answer. He called 4 more times in rapid succession, then the text started. Victoria, where are you? Please call me. We need to talk about this. It's not what you think. I love you. We can work through this. I blocked his number. Then Lily started texting from a number I didn't recognize. Victoria, please talk to Daniel. He's falling apart. This is all my fault. I take full responsibility. You deserve someone better than both of us. I'm so sorry. I'll regret this for the rest of my life. I blocked that number too. Melissa had advised me that blocking them was the best strategy. Anything they say can be used to manipulate you, she'd warned. They'll try to explain, to justify, to make you feel sorry for them. Don't give them that power. Around 8 p.m., my mother called. I'd been expecting this. Lily must have told her what happened. Probably her own version where she and Daniel were tragic lovers and I was the obstacle to their happiness. Victoria, honey, Lily just called me in tears. She told me what's been going on. I don't even know what to say. Then don't say anything, Mom, I replied, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. There's nothing to say. She says you threw her out, that you won't talk to Daniel. Don't you think you should at least hear their side before you make any permanent decisions? And there it was. The instinct to smooth things over, to keep the family together at all costs, even if it meant I had to swallow my pain and pretend everything was fine. Mom, do you know what they did? Do you know the details? Well, Lily said that she and Daniel developed feelings for each other, and yes, they crossed a line, but feelings aren't something you can control, Victoria. These things happen. Marriages end. But throwing away your relationship with your sister. Stop, I said, and my voice was hard now. Mom, they had an affair for 5 months. In my home. In my bed. They were planning to move in together, and didn't plan to tell me until after they'd secured an apartment and figured out how to divide assets in a way that benefited them most. This wasn't some tragic love story. This was calculated betrayal. There was silence on the other end of the line. When my mother spoke again, her voice was smaller. 5 months? In your home? Yes. I found Lily's journal where she documented everything. Every lie, every stolen moment, every time they laughed about how naive I was. Oh, Victoria. Now my mother's voice cracked. I didn't know. Lily didn't tell me all of that. She made it sound like it just happened recently, like they were trying to fight it. They lied to you too, Mom. They're good at it. They've had a lot of practice. What do you need from me? My mother asked, and I could hear that she was crying now. What can I do? Nothing, I said honestly. I just need time. And I need you to understand that I'm not the bad guy here for refusing to forgive them immediately. I'm not the one who needs to make things right. I understand, she said quietly. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. After we hung up, I ordered room service, took a long bath, and tried to watch a movie on the hotel TV. I couldn't focus on it. My mind kept replaying moments from the past 5 months, reinterpreting them with this new knowledge. The birthday dinner where Daniel's hand had supposedly brushed Lily's under the table. The weekend I'd gone to that conference and come home to find them both in unusually good moods. The inside jokes, the knowing glances. It was like watching a movie you'd seen a dozen times, but suddenly realizing there was a completely different story hidden in the background. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke up to sunlight streaming through a gap in the curtains and my phone buzzing with messages. But these weren't from Daniel or Lily. They were from friends, family members, people who'd apparently heard what happened and wanted to reach out. My cousin Sarah. I heard what happened. I'm here if you need me. No judgment, no advice unless you want it. Just here. My college roommate Emma. I never liked Daniel. I know that doesn't help right now, but I wanted you to know that your instincts about him being off lately weren't wrong. Even my boss. Melissa gave me a heads up about your situation. Take the week off. Your projects are covered. Focus on yourself. The messages kept coming throughout the morning. People offering support, spare rooms, shoulders to cry on. It was overwhelming and comforting at the same time. I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me, who saw what had been done to me and were angry on my behalf. But there was one message that caught my attention, sent at 2 a.m. It was from Daniel's older brother, Marcus, who I'd always liked. Victoria, I just heard what Daniel did. I want you to know that I'm disgusted by his behavior, and you have my full support. If you need anything, and I mean anything, please reach out. You deserved so much better than this. I'm ashamed to call him my brother right now. That message from Marcus meant more to me than I expected. It reminded me that this wasn't about me being unlovable or not enough. This was about Daniel's choices, his character, his betrayal. Even his own family could see that. The divorce process moved faster than I anticipated. With the journal evidence and Melissa's expertise, Daniel had no leverage. He tried once through his lawyer to argue for a more equitable split, claiming that I was being vindictive. Melissa responded by threatening to make the journal entries public record in court proceedings. He backed down immediately. In the end, I kept most of our shared assets. Daniel wanted the apartment since he'd been planning to live there with Lily anyway, but I made sure he bought out my half at market value. The settlement gave me enough for a down payment on a new place and 6 months of living expenses while I figured things out. The hardest part wasn't the legal process. It was existing in the aftermath. For the first few weeks, I moved through my days in a fog. I'd wake up in the hotel room, forgetting for just a moment where I was and why, and then reality would crash over me again. I went to work because I needed the distraction, but I'd find myself staring at my computer screen, unable to focus on the manuscripts in front of me. Melissa found me a small 1-bedroom apartment in a different neighborhood, far enough from the old place that I wouldn't risk running into Daniel or Lily at the grocery store or coffee shop. It was on the 3rd floor of an old building with hardwood floors that creaked and windows that looked out over a tree-lined street. It was nothing like the apartment Daniel and I had shared, and that was exactly what I needed. Moving in was strange. I unpacked my boxes and realized how much of my life had been intertwined with Daniel's. I had to buy new towels because the ones I'd taken reminded me of him. I had to find a new coffee shop because our old one held too many memories. I had to build a new routine that didn't include anyone else's schedule or preferences. But slowly, something unexpected started to happen. I started to enjoy the silence. I started to appreciate the freedom of making decisions without consulting anyone. I could eat cereal for dinner if I wanted. I could leave dishes in the sink overnight. I could paint the bedroom walls a deep teal color that Daniel would have hated, but I loved. I signed up for a pottery class on Thursday evenings, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. The first night, I sat at the wheel with my hands covered in wet clay, trying to center a lump that kept wobbling off balance, and I started laughing. The teacher looked over, concerned, but I waved her off. I was laughing because it felt like such a perfect metaphor. Here I was trying to create something new from shapeless material, getting it wrong over and over, but slowly learning how to apply the right pressure in the right places. 3 months after I left, I ran into Lily at a bookstore downtown. I saw her first, browsing in the fiction section, and my first instinct was to leave before she noticed me. But something made me stay. Maybe I needed to see how I'd react, whether I'd fall apart or feel that old instinct to protect her. She looked different. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, probably bought with money Daniel was giving her. When she finally looked up and saw me, she froze. "Victoria," she said, and her voice cracked on my name. "Lily," I replied evenly. We stood there in the aisle with other shoppers moving around us, creating an island of awkward tension in the middle of ordinary life. "How are you?" she asked, and the question was so absurd that I almost laughed. "I'm rebuilding my life after my husband and sister destroyed it," I said. "How are you?" She flinched. "I deserve that. I deserve worse than that." "Yes, you do. I think about you every day," she continued, and now tears were forming in her eyes. "I think about what I did, what I threw away. You were the best sister anyone could ask for, and I betrayed you in the worst possible way. Is there a point to this conversation?" I asked, not unkindly, just honestly. "Are you looking for forgiveness? Because I can't give you that. Not today, maybe not ever." "No," she said quickly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that Daniel and I, we're not together anymore." That caught my attention. "What happened?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Turns out relationships built on lies and betrayal aren't very strong. Who knew? We lasted about 6 weeks after you left. We fought constantly. He blamed me for pushing too hard. I blamed him for making promises he couldn't keep. And underneath it all was this guilt that we couldn't escape. Every time we looked at each other, we saw what we'd done to you." "Good," I said simply. "You're living in that apartment we looked at," she continued. "The one with the good school district. He's living there alone now, and from what I hear from Mom, he's miserable. Works all the time, doesn't go out, doesn't date. I think he's finally realizing what he lost." "I hope he does," I said. "I hope both of you spend a long time thinking about what you did. Not because I want revenge, but because maybe it'll make you better people. Maybe you'll think twice before doing this to someone else." "I will," Lily said, wiping her eyes. "I promise you, Victoria, I will never do anything like this again. This has destroyed me. I lost my sister, my self-respect, everything that mattered." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since I'd found that journal, I felt something other than anger or betrayal. I felt sorry for her. Not the kind of pity that would lead to reconciliation, but a distant sadness for who she'd become, for the choices she'd made that would haunt her. "I hope you find a way to live with yourself, Lily," I said. "I really do. But I can't be part of that process. I need to focus on my own healing." "I understand," she whispered. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you seem okay. You seem stronger than I've ever seen you." "I am stronger," I agreed. "Betrayal has a way of burning away everything that isn't essential. What's left might be scarred, but it's real. It's mine." I left her standing there in the fiction section and walked out of the bookstore feeling lighter than I had in months. I didn't need her apology or her suffering to move forward. I was already moving forward without her. 6 months after everything fell apart, I met someone. Not romantically, just someone who would become important to my story. Her name was Grace, and she was a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. I'd finally decided to start therapy, recognizing that I couldn't process everything on my own. In our first session, Grace asked me what I wanted to achieve through therapy. "I want to learn how to trust again," I said. "Not necessarily in romantic relationships, but in my own judgment. I want to believe that I can see people clearly, that I'm not going to miss huge red flags again." Grace leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Victoria, can I offer you a different perspective? You didn't miss red flags. You saw a marriage that had been good for years. You saw a sister you'd protected and loved your whole life. You had no reason to suspect betrayal because you hadn't been given evidence of it. The problem wasn't your judgment. The problem was that 2 people you trusted decided to betray that trust." "But I should have known," I insisted. "Looking back, there were signs." "Looking back with knowledge of the outcome, anything can seem like a sign," Grace interrupted gently. "That's called hindsight bias. You're judging your past self with information your past self didn't have. That's not fair to you." Those sessions with Grace helped me reframe everything. I started to understand that what happened to me wasn't about my failings. It was about Daniel and Lily's choices. I couldn't have prevented it by being a better wife or a more attentive sister. They would have found a way to betray me regardless, because the problem was in them, not in me. I started dating again about 8 months after the divorce was finalized. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners with people I met through friends or dating apps. Some were nice, some weren't. I learned what I wanted and what I wouldn't tolerate. I learned that I'd rather be alone than settle for someone who didn't meet my standards. The first time someone I was dating lied to me about something small, a canceled plan blamed on work, when I later found out he'd gone out with friends instead, I ended it immediately. He was shocked, said I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal. But I'd learned that small lies become big lies. That trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. I wasn't going to waste my time on someone who thought lying was acceptable. 1 year after I found the journal, I threw myself a party. Not a celebration of my divorce, but a celebration of my survival, my growth, my new life. I invited everyone who had supported me through the darkest time of my life. Melissa, my cousin Sarah, my college friends, my co-workers, even Marcus, Daniel's brother, who had become a genuine friend. We gathered in my small apartment, which I'd finally finished decorating exactly the way I wanted it. Teal walls in the bedroom, bookshelves lining the living room, plants hanging in every window. It looked nothing like the apartment I'd shared with Daniel, and that was the whole point. I want to say something, I announced when everyone had arrived, raising my glass of wine. A year ago, I discovered that my marriage and my relationship with my sister were both based on lies. I discovered that 2 people I trusted completely had been betraying me for months. And I thought that discovery was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. Everyone was quiet, listening. But I was wrong, I continued. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it changed me. But it also freed me. It freed me from a marriage that wasn't serving me. It freed me from the obligation to maintain relationships with people who didn't value me. And most importantly, it freed me from the version of myself who was so afraid of being alone that she ignored her own needs. I looked around at the faces of people who genuinely cared about me, who had shown up when I needed them most. So this party isn't about mourning what I lost. It's about celebrating what I found. I found my strength. I found my voice. I found my boundaries. And I found all of you, or rediscovered you, or learned to let you in. Thank you for being part of my new life. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. The applause that followed felt like validation. Not just of my survival, but of my choice to transform pain into growth rather than bitterness. Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up paper plates and wine glasses, I sat by my window looking out at the city lights. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, the one who believed that a stable marriage and family harmony were the most important things in life. That woman had been so afraid of disruption, so invested in maintaining appearances, that she'd stopped checking in with her own happiness. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through old photos. There I was at my wedding, smiling brightly. There I was at family gatherings with Lily, arms around each other. There I was with Daniel on vacation, on date nights, in mundane moments around the apartment. Looking at those photos now, I could see something I'd missed before. In almost every picture, I was looking at the camera or at someone else. I was performing happiness rather than experiencing it. The only recent photos where I looked genuinely present, genuinely alive, were the ones taken after everything fell apart. Me covered in clay at pottery class, laughing at my lopsided bowl. Me with Melissa at a coffee shop, deep in conversation. Me alone in my new apartment, paint splattered and proud of the teal walls I'd just finished. Betrayal had stripped away my performance and forced me to confront reality. And reality, it turned out, was better than the fantasy I'd been maintaining. 2 years after finding the journal, I got a message from my father. He and my mother had divorced years ago, and we weren't particularly close, but he'd heard about what happened through family gossip. Victoria, I know we don't talk often, but I wanted to reach out. Your mother told me what Daniel and Lily did. I'm sorry you went through that. But I also wanted to tell you something. When your mother and I split up, it was because I'd been unfaithful. I don't think you ever knew that. She protected me, let everyone think it was a mutual decision. But the truth is, I betrayed her, and she had every right to hate me. I stared at the message, shocked by this revelation about my parents' divorce. He continued. She forgave me eventually, enough to be civil, to co-parent you and Lily. But she never forgot. And she never let me back in. For years, I resented that. I thought she was being stubborn, unforgiving. But now, watching how you've handled what happened to you, I understand. She was protecting herself. She was choosing her own dignity over my comfort. I wish I'd understood that sooner. I wish I'd done the work to become someone worthy of her forgiveness instead of just expecting it. You're stronger than I was, Victoria. Don't ever let anyone make you feel guilty for that strength. That message gave me a new understanding of my mother, of her quiet resilience, of the choices she'd made to protect herself while still raising 2 daughters. It also made me realize that my refusal to forgive Lily and Daniel wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. It was recognizing that some betrayals are too fundamental to come back from. And that's okay. I'd occasionally hear updates about Daniel and Lily through the family grapevine. Daniel had moved to a different city, apparently unable to face the judgment and awkward conversations with people who knew what he'd done. Lily was still local but had become somewhat isolated, having burned bridges not just with me but with friends who'd taken my side or who simply couldn't respect what she'd done. I didn't take pleasure in their difficulties, but I didn't feel sorry for them either. They were living with the consequences of their choices, just as I was living with mine. The difference was that my choices had been made from a place of self-respect, while theirs had been made from selfishness and cowardice. Around this time, I met someone who would become significant. His name was James, and he was a literature professor at the local university. We met at a book reading, both reaching for the same newly released novel at the signing table, and laughed at the coincidence. We started talking about books, then about life, and that conversation somehow lasted 3 hours. James had been through his own betrayal story. His ex-wife had left him for his best friend 5 years earlier, and he'd spent years rebuilding his life and learning to trust again. There was something comforting about being with someone who understood the specific pain of intimate betrayal, who didn't need me to explain why certain things triggered me or why I had boundaries that might seem extreme to people who'd never been through it. "I'm not going to promise you I'll never hurt you," he said on our 5th date, his honesty refreshing. "I'm human, I'll make mistakes. But I can promise you that I'll never lie to you, never cheat on you, and never make you feel like you're crazy for having doubts or concerns. If you ever feel uncertain about something, we talk about it. No secrets." That transparency, that willingness to be vulnerable while also respecting my wounds, felt like something entirely new. We took things slowly. There was no rush, no pressure. We both understood that real trust takes time to build and can be destroyed in an instant, so we were careful with each other. 3 years after finding the journal, I received a letter in the mail. An actual handwritten letter, not an email or text. The return address was Lily's, though from a town I didn't recognize. I held it for a long time, debating whether to open it or throw it away. Finally, curiosity won out. "Dear Victoria," it began, "I don't expect you to read this, and I don't expect a response. I'm writing this more for myself than for you, as part of my therapy. My therapist suggested I write down what I'd say to you if I had the chance, so here it is. I've spent the last 3 years trying to understand why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, but to understand it so I never do anything like it again. I've come to realize that I was jealous of you. I always have been. You were the successful sister, the one who had it all together. When I moved in with you after my breakup, I felt like such a failure in comparison. And when Daniel showed me attention, when he made me feel special and chosen, it filled something in me that had been empty for so long. But filling that emptiness by destroying your life was inexcusable. I took something that didn't belong to me, and I hurt the person who had only ever shown me love and support. There's no justification for that. No amount of jealousy or insecurity makes it okay. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that I see what I did clearly now. I see the person I was, and I'm working every day to become someone better. Someone who would never betray the people who love her. Someone worthy of being called your sister again, even though I know that ship has sailed. I hope you're happy, Victoria. I hope you've built a life that brings you peace and joy. You always deserved that, and I'm sorry I took it away from you, even temporarily. With regret and love, Lily. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry anymore, but because there was nothing to say. Lily's journey toward becoming a better person was hers to take, and it didn't require my participation or validation. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who hurt you is to let them go completely. To release them from the hope of reconciliation, so they can move forward without waiting for your forgiveness. That's what I did for Lily, and in doing so, I freed us both. Now, as I tell you this story, it's been 4 years since I found that journal in Daniel's desk drawer. For years since my life exploded and I had to rebuild it from scratch. I'm 35 years old, living in a home I chose and decorated myself, in a relationship with someone who treats me with respect and honesty, surrounded by friends and family who showed me what real loyalty looks like. The scars are still there. I still have moments when I doubt my judgment, when I wonder if I'm missing something obvious. I still have a strong reaction to deception of any kind, even small white lies that most people would overlook. James understands this. He's patient with my moments of doubt, reassuring me without making me feel foolish for needing that reassurance. But the scars don't define me anymore. They're part of my story, part of what shaped me into who I am now, but they're not the whole story. The whole story includes the strength I discovered when everything fell apart, the boundaries I learned to set and maintain, the understanding that being alone is better than being with people who diminish you, the friendships that deepened when I was vulnerable enough to accept help, the relationship I'm building now with someone who sees my wounds and doesn't run from them. If I could go back and prevent the betrayal, would I? That's a question I've asked myself many times. The answer is complicated. Yes, I'd prefer not to have experienced that pain. Yes, I'd prefer that my marriage had been real and my sister had been trustworthy. But I also know that without that catalyst, I might have stayed in a mediocre marriage for years, slowly dimming my own light to avoid conflict, never discovering what I was truly capable of. The betrayal was devastating, but it was also liberating. It forced me to stop performing and start living. It forced me to stop settling and start demanding what I deserve. It forced me to stop being afraid of being alone and start enjoying my own company. To anyone listening to this who's going through their own betrayal story, whether it's a cheating partner, a disloyal friend, a family member who broke your trust, I want you to know something. Right now, in the thick of it, it feels like you're drowning. It feels like you'll never breathe normally again, never trust again, never be happy again. I know because I felt all of that. But you will breathe. You will trust again, maybe more carefully, but you will. And you will be happy again, not the same kind of happy you were before, but a deeper, more authentic happy that comes from knowing yourself fully and refusing to settle for anything less than you deserve. The journey from betrayal to healing isn't linear. There will be days when you think you're fine, and then something small will trigger a memory, and you'll be right back in that moment of discovery, feeling everything again. That's normal. Healing isn't about never feeling pain. It's about learning that you can feel the pain and survive it, that it doesn't have the power to destroy you. You are stronger than you think. I promise you that. The very fact that you're still here, still getting up every morning, still trying, proves your strength. Don't let anyone, especially not the people who hurt you, make you doubt that strength. And don't let anyone rush your healing. Take the time you need. Set the boundaries you need. Cut off the people you need to cut off. Your healing is more important than anyone else's comfort. Your peace is more important than maintaining appearances, or keeping the family together, or giving someone a second chance they haven't earned. The betrayal doesn't have to define you, but your response to it can. You can choose bitterness, or you can choose growth. You can choose to stay stuck in the past, or you can choose to build a future. You can choose to see yourself as a victim, or you can choose to see yourself as a survivor. I chose survival. I chose growth. I chose myself. And that has made all the difference. My story isn't unique. Betrayal happens every day to people who deserve better. But what makes each story powerful is what we do with it, how we transform pain into wisdom, how we rebuild ourselves stronger than before. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that you're not alone in your pain or your strength, then please subscribe to this channel. Share your own story in the comments if you feel comfortable. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Let's build a community of people who chose to rise instead of staying broken. I share new stories every day, stories of survival, of awakening, of people who discovered their strength in their darkest moments. Check the description for links to more stories that might speak to your journey. Remember this, betrayal reveals truth. It's painful, but it's also clarifying. And sometimes the life you build from the ruins is better than the one that fell apart. Take care of yourself. You deserve truth. You deserve loyalty. You deserve love that doesn't come with lies attached. Never settle for less.